my application. Everybody run your app and make sure at least you're seeing some sort of table view with the title of our project. So here I'm running my application. And we should at minimum see a table view with a header saying fellow countries. Do we see that? Yes? All right, cool. So we have a table view, great. So let's keep working on it. So now we are connected. We've connected the four UI elements from our cell. Now let's go to the view controller that manages that view. Let's go over to the view controller that manages this view to write logic there. So I will close most of my windows here. I'll open up my navigator window. I'll navigate to country list controller. So country list controller. It's very empty now. So we need some code here. The code we need okay. Cool. So the code we need here is basically the code to manage our table view, the code to manage the sections, and all that. So we have a lot of code to write. Question?
So this is our own view controller.
For now, yes. And it manages the one scene we have. Actually, we have two scenes, but this is the first scene, right? Okay, cool. So let's write some code here. The first thing we'll write is we need a table view of some sorts. So IB outlet. Here we need a table view, UI table view. Great. We'll override viewDidLoad because we need to write up some setup logic there. So viewDidLoad, again, we call in super viewDidLoad. We need to call the parents class to go ahead and set up itself. And what else do we need? We need some sort of property, our continents. So we'll create a property called continents that will have an array of arrays because we'll have a section to review. Our UI looks like this. So to review, this is our UI, right? So to review, this is our UI, where our continents, we had 5 continents last week. Yes, we have 7, but in our application, that's the data that we provided. We have 5 continents, right, representing all the fellows here in the class. And we have sections. So we have an array of arrays. Everybody with that? Right? So that's what our UI looks like. We have sections, which is the name of the continent. And in each section, we have countries. Like Asia, we have 2 countries or 3 here. Cool? All right. So let's continue. So we have a continents array. It's an array of arrays. And we'll use a property observer to update using didSet property observer to update or to reload the table view. Right? So on our table view, whenever our continents get set, we say table view, reload data. And again, reload data reloads all the contents of our table view. What happens? It reloads all the contents. It reloads all the contents. Cell for row gets called for each row on screen. Okay? It reloads the data. Reload data. Like in our example, if our view comes on screen, right? And in our viewDidLoad, we'll say in our viewDidLoad, let's actually write it out. In our viewDidLoad, we'll say continents gets assigned a value. Because if we do not assign it a value, it doesn't have any data. Agree? So the minute we assign continents a value, it reloads the table view to show us what the values are. If we do not do that, our table view does not get called again, and our values will be our table view will be all empty. The contents of our table view will be empty unless we explicitly call reload data. Okay, got it? Cool. So if you do a filter, for example, like you filter like we did last week, if you say filter ascending, right, the table view needs to be reloaded in order for the contents to change. Same as when you say descending, it needs to call reload data again based on your filter to reload it again, right? It's like a change. It has to call reload data to make that change, to show that visual change. Okay, so here, how do we get access to our continents? Anybody look at the struct and tell me how I get access to the continents array of arrays. It needs to return an array of arrays. We have a function in there that we wrote. Magiet, what's the function called? How do we get access to continents here in ViewDeload? Magiet is in the front, not the back today. Look at your country struct, your country.swift. Look at country.swift file and let me know how do I access. Right now I need data, right? I need to get access to the continents array of arrays in country.swift file. How do we get access to that? I'll start out by saying country. Dot what? Dot get. Very good. Continents, right? Everybody? Right, so here, this is a type method. It's a type method, sorry. Get continents is a type method. Why is it a type method? It's called on the type. What's the type? The type is called country. I do not create an instance of it to call it. I call it on the type. Anybody want me to go over that again? Right? So we have type methods and we have instance methods, right? So for review, we have instance methods and we have type methods, right? An instance method is called explicitly on the instance. What does that look like? Example, if we have a person, or if we have a country, everybody agreed country is an instance of the country type, right? This lowercase country here. So this is an instance, right? So country is an instance. Country is an instance of country. Or let's make it better. Nigeria. And let's rename this here Nigeria. So Nigeria is an instance of country. Everybody agree? Everybody agree? So if I have some function on Nigeria, I could simply say Nigeria.info, like that. So this would be an instance. Info here would be called an instance method. Why? You call it using the instance. Okay? On the other hand, if I have, as I have at the bottom here, we have country is a type. Right? And get continents is a type method. Right? Get continents is a type method. It's declared or defined. It's defined as function or static func. Get. So the static makes it a type method. Everybody with me? If I remove the static keyword, it's a regular instance method. Everybody with me? If we go back to our country struct and we look at get continents, or if we simply command click here and we jump to definition, command click on get continents, jump to definition, you see we make use of the static keyword. Do we see the static keyword? That makes it a type method, right? It becomes like a global method on all the instances of a country has access to get continents. Okay? We do not have to create an instance of it. We just simply say country dot get continents. Everybody with me? Okay, cool. So know the terminology there. So here, to answer your question, Chelsea, so when we set our continents, again, review again. When we set our continents, what happens? Margienne, when I set continents, what gets called? Let me bring up the whole screen here. When I set continents on line 33, what happens? Did set, right? So did set gets called. Everybody heard what Majid said? So when I set, right, we set in continents here. We all agree that we set in continents. We're changing the value of it. We're setting it, right? So when I set the continents here, did set gets called, my table view reloads. Okay? So if all went well, the minute I run that code, I should have continents showing up on my table view. But that's not all, right? We're not done. We have a lot more to go. A lot more to go. This is nothing yet. This is just saying what the data is. What else? What do I need to set up? How do I set up my table view? I could start anywhere. Anybody could let me know where I start. Brendan, where do I start? My table view. I want to get the logic for my table view going. What do I need for my table view? What's the essential parts of a table view, of setting up a table view in your view controller? We have the table view, we have the UI, we have a table view. How do we get it data? If I was to leave the project like it is right now, and I say, Brendan, go ahead and bring me back a project that shows me all the data in my table view, what would be the rest of the code you would write? Or where would you start? What would be the next thing you write? Okay. What's the function called? Lifeline. We need to get our table view loaded with data. What's the next step? Yes, Tanya. Okay, so Tanya is saying create an extension on our view controller, right? So I'll go ahead and do that. And what's that extension doing? Everybody heard Tanya? So, and Tanya says, create an extension on my country list controller and conform to UI table view data source. Remember, our table view will not have data unless we conform to the data source. This is a big part of Friday, right? So Friday, you do not have a table source. You need to create it yourself, right? So here we're conforming, as Tanya said, to UI table view data source, right? This is essential for your table view to have data. Your table view needs that object that gives it the data. Okay? This is step one, right? Conform to UI table view data source. What's the next step? Add the methods. What's the first method? Or you could what's it called? Self for ROAT. Okay, so we'll create self for ROAT. And before that, we'll actually put number of rows. And those are the two required methods of the data source. Everybody with me? Right? Number of rows, how many rows am I expecting? What am I returning here for number of rows, for my continents? Continents. You said continents that count? Ah, he's trying to look over notes, which is good. What are we returning here? Sections, according to Mr. Sering, right? Why sections, sir? Array of arrays. Everybody heard Mr. Sering? This is very important, especially for Game of Thrones. Here you return in, you need to use, since we have sections, we need to return the sections count. Since we have sections, right? Array of arrays, we need to return the sections count, right? Each section, each continent knows how many countries they have. So each section or continent knows how many countries it has, right? Example, Africa for now has one country. Questions? Questions? If it was a flat array, yes, sir. Just number of rows for that particular section. Okay. If it was a flat array, what would this be? Would it be section? What would it be? It would just be that count, right? According to Tanya here. So if it was a flat array, I would simply just say continents.count. Okay. But since it's sections, you have to return the sections count. Okay, very good. Yeah. Yes, so for example, if we go back to our UI here, so when I say give me the number of rows here, that section returns 1. Cool. And if I say, for example, Asia, I think for now we have 3-ish, right? It would return 3. Each section returns the count. Cool. So let's move on to cell for row. What am I doing in cell for row? We wrote out 4 steps last week. You could basically review your notes. This is where you want to start practicing how you're going to maneuver notes on Friday. Because yes, it's open book, but at the same time, you have to be organized to know that you did write it somewhere. Where is that place I wrote it? Have it somewhere you could flip back to. We wrote 4 steps in that particular section. This is the same thing we did, by the way. We've done that exact same code last week. So this is where I want to give you guys a couple seconds to see where your code was before. If you don't have it, it's on the repo. Everything is on the repo. So this is where we really need to have our notes handy. And we had 4 steps here. What's step number 1? Eric, what's the first thing we're doing here in our cell for row? The Q reusable cell. What does the Q reusable cell do, Eric? So Eric says use table view dot the Q reusable cell. What does the Q reusable cell do? Christian? Yes. So basically it recycles the cell. It doesn't create 100 cells in memory. As it needs the cells, it uses them or it creates a new one, right? And it does that for performance reasons, right? It's not going to load in extra cells when it doesn't need it on screen. So here we use the Q reusable cell with index path. For our string, what are we passing in? What's the string? Country cell. And be very careful, whatever you call it, that's what you want to type in here. Whatever you passed in to the reuse identifier in your interface builder attributes, that's what you want to have here. Or else we know what happens, it's going to crash because it doesn't find it. At this point, we'll simply return cell to get rid of our errors. Great. All right. We're approaching new territory. Buckle your seatbelts. All right, I'll stop here. We're approaching new territory. Let's really pay focus here. Okay, we spoke about custom cells. This is not a custom cell. What does this return? Option click on cell. Option click on cell and tell me what type it is. It's a UI table view cell, correct? What did we create? We subclass UI table view cell, but what is our cell? What cell did we create ourselves? A country cell. So we need access to that country cell. What's our favorite tool to use when we have a type and we want to cast it to a different type? What do we use? What do we do? As question mark, right? According to Yulia. So Yulia says use as question mark, which is downcasting it, right? So downcast it to the type we need. Very good. So I will say as question mark here. So as question mark, and what type do we need? We need a country cell, right? Great. So we use typecasting to cast our UI table view cell to a country cell. Okay? Right now, computer is already complaining it's an optional. Because it is an optional. Why? As question mark is an optional. Everybody with me? So now if you action click on cell, what's the type of cell? We don't even have to do it actually. It tells us right here in the error. It says it's a country cell. Right? So now we have a country cell. Everybody with me? Without a country cell, we couldn't call configure cell. Okay? So now this is also important. So we're getting used to the guard, right? You see how it comes, right? That's why we say we hold on certain topics, and as we use them, we'll get more familiar with them. We've seen them in Prepare for Segue, and know that's what you do in Prepare for Segue for Friday. You have to typecast the thing to the type you expect. And here, right before the let, we'll unwrap it using a guard. And right after our country cell, we'll say else return. Build, Command B, make sure you have no errors, because I also want to show us a new thing in our territory. Because right now it wants us to return something. Why? What's the error? Amini, what's the error here? Exactly. Why should we return a value? Because explicitly it says, I need you to return me a UI table view cell. And we're not doing that here. We're just saying return. We need to return something. We need to return something. Okay? Before we could have just gotten away with return because there was nothing, there was no return type. So simply saying returning the guard was okay. But here we need to return some value. Okay? Again, buckle your seatbelts. We'll see something else again today. I'm gonna take out the return keyword, and I'll use a keyword fatal error, which we haven't seen yet. I'll talk about now. Right? So fatal error will just crash your app. If this cell does not exist, it crashes the app because that cell should exist before I ship my app to the App Store. Right? Because I've tested my app, my table view loads. After that, there's no reason why I should have a fatal error. Everybody with me? I want to intentionally crash my application if I do not get a country cell. So here I'm explicitly crashing the app with that fatal error message here. So explicitly crashes the app at runtime if a country cell does not exist. This is a developer error. All right. So if it doesn't exist, we'll crash the app intentionally and we'll say couldn't find or couldn't dequeue a country cell. Again, there's no reason why this should crash if everything we did went on perfectly, right? But we want it to crash if we did something wrong, meaning if in our storyboard the country cell name is wrong, that's going to crash, right? If we do not have a country cell, well, first of all, it wouldn't compile in our code if we don't have a country cell class, right? So crash the app if my cell wasn't being able to be queued. And for now, the only reason why is if this identifier here is wrong, right? Because our cell exists. So if the identifier here is wrong, or we forgot to put it in storyboard. Everybody with me? Cool. All right, so here we have our cell. Great. How do I get a country? So we're in cell 4 I need to get the object to be set at index path. Yes, sir.
So if you remove the error that comes up with the word body does not fall through, it's a great music that reserves
Make sure your logic, so your logic for your God statement should be God let cell.
No, yeah, I want to know what case that error is a generated out or
It's just a crash, immediate crash. Doesn't look at anything else. Just abruptly stops your application and you'll get an error right at 50, telling you what went wrong. Okay, so here we need to get the object to set at the current index path. How do we get to that object? And what object are we trying to set? We're trying to set a country. Or we're trying to get the country. How do we get a country? Yes, sir.
Index path dot row section dot row.
Very good. So Oscar is saying we use two indices, right? So we use index path dot section and index path dot row. Why do we do that?
Is an array of arrays.
It's an array of arrays, right? So Oscar is saying we use an array of arrays on our collection, on our array continents to get the country, the current country. So we started by saying country. Any app you're doing for Friday, you have to do that step. It might be index path.row, it might be index path section, index path.row. But we have to get to that step. We have to get to an object, okay? To set that current cell. We have to do this. So here I'm going to use my array, its continents. I will get access to the section first, and then I'll get access to the row for the section. So now I have a valid country. If I option click on country, I have a valid country here. So if I option click on country, I have a valid country. Great. Our next step is to configure the country cell. How do we configure the country cell? We wrote some code before the break. How do we configure the country cell? Luba, how do we configure the country cell? We wrote a method in our country cell. What's that method called? Luba, many Lubas. What's the function called? In our country cell, we have a function we wrote. What's it called? Amini, help your friend locate the cell class. Yeah, the country cell, that's the Swift. What's it called? Configure cell. Everybody sees that? Right? So on my cell, I have an instance method called configure cell. And configure cell, look at that. It takes a country. Great. We worded perfectly, right? So the one argument is a country, right, everybody? The one argument for that method is a country, and we simply pass it country. I'll take a step back. Well, come on, Xcode. I set this value already. Don't you see? Okay, part of writing the configure cell, right now we have less code in our cell for row. We have less code in our cell for row right now, right? Simply, all what we say is cell configure yourself. Cell.configure cell, if we look at the configure cell again, if I go to my country cell, this is my configure cell. It could be more complex than that. For now, it's only 4 lines of code. But that's 4 lines of code I took out of my cell for row. Everybody with me? Okay? So we write a simple method there. Awesome. Okay, so we have our number of rows. We have our cell for row. We're missing 2 more section methods, section-specific methods. So we're missing two more section specific methods. Anybody want to tell me what's the first one that we need to implement? You could basically look at your code from last week. So if we're creating sections, there are two more protocol methods that we need. Two more section specific protocol methods we need here. Two more section specific protocol methods. Number of sections, very good. So I'll implement number of sections. For number of sections, what am I returning? Bienvenido. For number of sections, what am I returning here? What's our array called? So I return continents that count, right? Everybody agree? So here you return continents that count. Here it's okay to do that, right? And our example, I think we have 5 continents. Everybody with me? Questions about that? Yes? So, okay, that's good. That's what I want to hear. I want to hear those questions. So this one, number of sections. How many sections do we have? We have 5 sections because we have 5 continents. The first one, the number of rows in section.
Oh, if you do the
Yes.
Okay.
Right? And if you do not have an array of arrays, that section number will be 1 by default. So if you do not implement, again, if you do not implement this method, it returns 1 by default. Right? It returns 1 because your table view just has 1 section. Right? But if you have specific sections, you have to implement that method. So the default, if you do not implement it, is 1. So default count for sections is 1 if number of sections is not implemented.
It doesn't matter.
No, it doesn't. Default count of sections. Everybody understood that last line here? So if you have a flat array, you do not implement that method, right? And by default, you get 1 section, okay? So that's why this method is able to work here, the number of rows in section, because you only have 1 section. And if you have 1 section, what's that index? That index is 0, okay? All right. But if you're implementing sections, you have to implement number of sections. And what's the other method we're implementing? Shania, I need one more method for my sections to work. What's that method? I've implemented number of sections. So right now the table view knows how to set up its cells. It knows how many cells per section. It knows how many sections it has, but there's one more item we need, one more method. You could overlook our example from last week. We need one more method. Greg, we need one more method for our sections. Title, right? Because the section needs that title. Very good. Without that, it's going to be empty. We won't see our section headers. Okay? So here we return title. You can start typing in title for header and press enter. Be careful to say title for header and not title for footer. Okay? Because there's also a footer on the table view. But for now, we want to set the header, the top of it, the top of each section. So it's title for header in section. Again, please, it's Monday, but the time will go quickly. Please make notes for yourself. If you're not comfortable with anything, ask a question. We'll go over it. Okay? Don't be stuck, because Friday you'll be stuck. And yes, there's only so much you could search for when you're stuck. No matter how open Google is, if you don't know what you're looking for, it gets frustrating. So please ask any question you have. Now, yes? Oh, it doesn't come up for you? Does it, are you conforming to UI table view data source? You are, correct? Is your extension on the country list controller? Great. So as you start typing, if I go back here, it should come up for you, unless there's the next error. So, Yulia, I type in title for header. Did it come up for you? We'll double check your computer and see what's going on. So her autocomplete is off. Double check to see if there's the next error at the top there. So verify that it is the UI table view data source she's conforming to on her extension. Okay. Mr. Cameron, what am I returning here? Aha, a string. Yes, sir. I am returning a string. Continents. Very good. So Cameron is saying use this section, right, for the continents, right? And the continents use first, right? Just get the first country in that particular continent and get the continent for that country because we did sort them. This only works if all your continents are sorted. And your continents should be sorted because we sorted them to get to our sorted array of arrays. Okay, so we first, back in our country Swift, we did sort our array based on continent. So this is why this works. Great, so here I get the continent, example, Africa. It's a string, and as Cameron is saying, we have to return a string here. So this would return the string Africa. That's why we get the Africa in the header. Great, I think we are good with our implementations. Anything else I'm missing in the view did load here? If I run, will my stuff work?
No.
Why?
One, you think about it.
One, my table view is not collected. Very good. Two, and my view controller is not set to be the data source. Right? So let's do the second one first. So in my view did load, which is a good place to set up stuff here, we'll set the view controller as the data source for the table view. And the way we do that, we say table view dot data source. We say table view dot data source equal to self. Everybody, make sure you have that in your view load. Make sure you set in the view controller as the data source. Why are we doing that? We have to do that in order for those functions to be called on that table view. And we, the view controller, respond back with giving back the number of rows, giving back the number of sections, giving back the title, right? So this is an essential part of making your table view work. So for Friday, make sure when you set up your table view, the first thing you do after that, set table view data source equal to self. Everybody with me? Right? Great. Okay, now let's get access to our storyboard so we could do as Tiffany says. We need to connect our table view in our view controller to our storyboard file. So open up your storyboard and connect your table view outlet to your table view outlet over to your scene. Anytime now, this is gonna come up. What else I have here? Why my thing is loading, which I might have to kill and open again. 1 second. There might be constraint issues. We'll get to that. 1 second. Let me force quit my Xcode. While I'm reloading my Xcode, did anybody get the table view set up? Is it running? Is it populating? Great. I need that 16-inch MacBook Pro, Andy. I need more horsepower here. You got me? Okay. Birthday is Friday. Cool. Come on. Who has gotten their table view loaded? Great, 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 great.
I have a feeling,
You got a fatal error? That's probably from your, make sure you see what the fatal error says. Read on the error message. Your table view probably hasn't been set yet. Double check that you connected your table view. Open up your assistant editor. Indexing, indexing. Open up assistant editor. Does not come up. One second. Okay, so I have my assistant editor open up here. I want to connect my table view. Make sure you connect your table view over to your table view scene. Okay, everybody did that? Yes? Errors are good, especially when they explain what they are. What error did you have? Okay, so it went down to our fatal error down here, right? So make sure your country cell, your identifier is the same as your storyboard. Make sure you press enter. And make sure that your cell class, the identifier for your class is the same. Identifier for the cell class should be country cell. It should be for your cell class. What about your string? Does it match? The string for your identifier, does it match? And double check your identifier's class. We'll double check yours, Cassandra. Did you got it? All right, very good. So while my simulator runs, everybody else, were you able to see your table view? Did it load? Okay. The last step I did was connected my table view property here. I connected my table view to the table view scene. So the table view that we created in code, I connected it. I connected it to the scene. Luba, Yulia, sorry. Cool. And now I need to run on my, simulator, not my device. Because now I could see it, but we cannot see it. We don't know. We don't know what I'm saying. Cool. Greg, did you get yours to work?
I did.
You did?
Mic is transferable.
Now you drop your mic. All right. He dropped his mic and he walked away. The what? The storyboard ID. We didn't give it a storyboard ID. We're not using storyboard ID right now. Not for today. Okay, so my simulator is up. Let's see if we get any values here. My simulator is up. Let's see if we get data. At this point, anything that doesn't work, we could backtrack and make it work, right? We have an error. We could go see if it's the reuse identifier. Did we set the class identifier, right? There's a lot of moving parts, Finally, we have our countries. So our countries should look very similar to mine. It's almost like we didn't do anything, right? The thing just works. If I scroll down, look at that. Even the cell sizing works. Everybody, do we see the cell sizing? So we see Dominican Republic. The cell for the Dominican Republic country is bigger than all the rest of the cells. Do we see that? That is self-resizing cells. The cell was able to resize itself based on its content. Right? Yes, sir. On the description, yes. Right? Yes. So we not just setting it to 0, but making sure, let's all review this, please. This is very important. You'll try to do it yourself. As I said, this is not exactly for assessment, but you yourself will try to do it and you'll be like, hey, my stuff is not resizing. Anytime you have a constant, if you have a constant height the cell will be the constant height. We have no constant here. We said, let's review, let me zoom in here. We said Dominican Republic, right? Where it says the country name, we set it to the top of the cell, correct? We set the description, where it says invented here, we set the description to the bottom of Dominican Republic. We agree? We did not give the label an explicit height. Everybody with me? We told the label, your number of rows, your number of lines is 0. Everybody with me? So the 0 here, the label will start to grow when it's gotten to a full line. It will start to grow vertically. That's why the cell itself grows. Everybody with me? We did not tie the image view to the top or the bottom of the cell. That would be a constant. Anytime you break it, the minute you break any part of it, having a constant, the entire thing does not work anymore. And it will become very frustrating, right? So the only way self-sizing works if there's no constant on the height. Okay? The minute you have a constant, you don't get self-sizing anymore. No matter what you do. Even if you set number of lines to 0, right? It doesn't matter. You have to, the most important constraints are the vertical constraints. Those cannot be constants. Okay? All right. We'll do many examples of self-sizing more, but for now, just know how this works. Yeah. The vertical we did was the vertical for the vertical for Dominica, right? Dominica is tied to the top of it. Yeah, the name of the country is tied to the top, but the label itself just grows dynamically based on the height of the cell. Horizontal constraints doesn't matter. The vertical constraints that matter. Cool? And it cannot be constant. All right, cool. Let's see more things here. I want to show us the right way or the better way to do fonts in iOS. Because right now we've been doing fonts using constants, for lack of a better word, right? Right now we've been using fonts using constants, like 17, 25, 30, whatever it is, right? Those are constants. I'm not going to exactly introduce us to what's known as dynamic type. I don't want to give us too many things right now because we'll be like, hey, is that on the exam? Is that on the exam? But I just want to point to us the better way to set fonts in iOS. Everybody with me? Right? The way we'll use fonts, we'll go to Attributes Inspector. We'll make those two fonts different. We'll make the country font and the description font different, right? Using what's known as UI font text style, right? We'll use that, and we'll come back to it in Unit 3 to talk about dynamic type, okay? Dynamic type, for now, is basically accessibility. If we don't know what accessibility means, we are able bodies, right? We could see, right? We could see better. We have close to 20/20. But 10 years from now, or even tomorrow, right, my eyes might be really bad. At that point, I need my font to be bigger. I need to be able to see a bigger font on my phone. So dynamic type enables the users of iPhones to scale up the font size. So I could go from a regular font, which is what we're seeing right now, but no matter what you are, no matter how healthy you are right now, in 30 years, 40 years from now, that small font you see in that Dominican Republic is going to be really hard for you to see it, okay? So you want to increase the size of it, right? Accessibility is making your apps accessible to non-able bodies. Apple is a big proponent of accessibility, right? So accessibility gives people, for example, here, if my site is not as good, I'm able to go to my settings of my application, increase the font size of my application, of my font, and make the fonts bigger. Everybody with me? Everybody with me? Okay, so that's accessibility. For now, I'll show us how to change the font. Actually, we could actually see right now. Everybody has the simulator running? Does everybody have their simulator running? Constraints we'll come back to. Because as I said, with the self-sizing, we really have to go through it together, which we did earlier. But if you miss one part of it, it's hard to catch up. So we'll go through it again together with you, okay? Okay, everybody has the app running in their countries. Do we have data? You don't have data. Did you set your table view? Did you change your identifier? Do you have an identifier set? Anybody else has a fatal error with nail here? Ben Benito, what is your error?
On my, variables on the,
Yes, exactly where we have it. Because right now, this country cell might not be matching your country cell in your storyboard. One of two things. There's a couple of ways it could go wrong. Did you go here and verify that you have an identifier?
I even did it. So I went back there.
So this is this. Did you press enter? Sometimes you just enter. Country cell is here. Does it have the identifier? Is this guy? This is good. The cell itself is cell. Oh, did you connect your table view?
It's connected.
Oh, it's crashing. The name. There's a name. But right now the name is just cell. I don't feel, let's see. There's something that's not connected. It's looking for the cell image. One of those things are definitely
Are you sure that you're not using cell and then you're using soy cell? I think the issue with your cell is maybe not that's why the layout is alright, so that's what that.
Tony, double check. Okay, where are we? So let's look at the fonts. Let's look at the fonts and then we'll continue on. You want to wait? Okay, let's look at the fonts. So click on your country name, for example. Click on your country name. Your cells are not configured properly. Your constraints are off. So right now the cell resizing is not working. I need to sit down and help you with that one. Cool? So for now, your data works, but the self-resizing is off. So we need to redo your constraints. That was the one part where, yeah, it gets a little harder to debug with the constraints being off. We'll do them together. All right, so click on, let's go to the Attributes Inspector. Attributes Inspector, click on country name, for example. Click on country name, for example. Let's get to Attributes Inspector. And let's all pay attention to where it says font here. Do we all see where it says font? System size 17. Right? This is the part I was talking about. This is a hard-coded number. If I change my dynamic type, like if the user of my application wants to scale up the font, this won't increase. It's not going to increase the size of the font. Everybody with me? Let's see what that looks like, because it's better to see in a demo, because you guys were like, what are you talking about? I don't see. Let's go to settings on our simulator. Let's all go to settings. Let's go to settings on our simulator. Everything is so slow on this computer. Go to settings. You should see accessibility. Click on settings of your app. Do you see accessibility? Do you see accessibility? So accessibility, again, is making your app available to everybody, making everybody able to use your application, whether they have good vision or not good vision, right? We'll get into more accessibility features later, but starting off by making your app being able to scale its font up or down is good, okay? So if you click on accessibility here, and do you see display and text size? Click on display and text size. Do we see larger text? Click on larger text. Do we see larger accessibility sizes? Sering? Do you see larger accessibility sizes? Click on it, turn it on, rather. And right now it's on level 4, for example, which is the default. If I scale it all the way up, you see it scales up, right? It scales up, correct? Let's go back to our app. So go back to your app. Go back to your country's app. Everything scales up, even the name of the apps here. Look at that. Our app right now is not accessible because North America got bigger, right? Right? North America got bigger, but our font sizes did not change. Our label, the two labels we put in did not go up with the user's preference. The user said, I want to see bigger font, and we told the user, we don't care about what you said. Right? Basically, that's what we're saying, right? Because we need to make our app accessible. So let's go ahead and do that by using dynamic type. So go to Attributes Inspector. Go to Attributes Inspector. Let me zoom in here. Where it says System 17, click on the text button here, where it says T here, click on that text button. Right? Do we see font? The first option says font. Click on that blue up and down arrow. Do we see text styles? This is what Apple recommends. Apple recommends that we use text styles to enable our app by default to be dynamic type. So if we go ahead and we use one of those text styles, I'll slack out some document that shows the different text styles, how they look on screen. If we go down and we say headline, for example, I click on headline. Headline is the country. Headline will be the country, and sub-headline will be the description. Everybody with me? So click on headline for the country, and click on your description label. Click on your description label, and make the font for your description label a sub-headline. Click on the font for your country description and go back to font here for system. Click on the text button again. Click on system here and make it, we said, sub-headline, right? So the top is a headline and the bottom is a sub-headline. Yes, sir? Yeah, country name is headline and description is going to be sub-headline. Okay, click on it. Great. That's all we have to do, believe it or not, for our text to be able to scale up and scale down. So let's run our app again. So you guys were able to see dynamic type, right? So run your app again, and if you run your app again, I think the settings should be the same. So if the settings should remain the same because we did change it. So our text should be able to scale up.
Should I also change it for the description also?
Yeah, description is going to be headline.
I mean, also make that automatically adjust.
Yeah. The actual font that we use is called UI font text style, but the classification of what we're doing is dynamic type. So dynamically make your font change based on what the user preference is. Okay, so where's my app? My app is loading. Did yours scale up?
No, mine's fine.
Very good. So if you did everything correctly, again, we just changed two properties here. It should have scaled up, right? Look, it works, right? Now my Nigeria scales up. The description for Nigeria scales up as well. Cool? So again, keep it in the back of your mind that your app is not just for able bodies. Your app is also for unable bodies. People with not as good of eyesight as you, okay? So the user should be able to scale up the app, the font size up or down. Some people want more content. They could actually scale lower than the default value. Yes?
So they need to change the settings of our simulator as well.
Well, the only change we need to do is in Interface Builder. Yeah, but we did the settings just to see what the user does. You see what I'm saying? So the user is the one that would come to your app and change the settings. But you want to test it out. So we tested it out, go into settings to make it go up. And now it works because it was able to scale up. So again, at some future Xcode, we might get by default using the font styles. Everybody with me? But right now, this is still older Xcode, still older UI kit stuff. But with SwiftUI, by default, it makes us use dynamic type. On a font, we say title or we say headline, whatever, which is a dynamic type already. Cool? Cool, everybody? All right, I will send out as I promised. Let me stack it out to you guys right now. That's a good one to bookmark. It shows the various sizes of the fonts, right? Because one of the things, it's better to see it visually, to see the different types of fonts you have. I think it's this one. Let me stack it out. Okay, slacked it out. Did we get access to it? I slacked it out here. Slack. Did I slack it out in the wrong place? Yeah, it's iOS. Auto layout. This is the wrong one. 1 second. Okay, do we get access to it? All right, let's see what it looks like. Okay, so this guy wrote up a nice little blog post here to show us, right? This is what I'm talking about. Like you see the different scales, how they look, right? So it's pretty handy to see what they look like. Currently, what we use the headline, option and the sub-headline option. It makes sense for our use case, right? Because the title of the country should be bigger, somewhat bolder, and the sub-headline is the description. Cool? So make sure you bookmark that, and you could probably add it to auto layout, or you could add it to dynamic type, or you could add it to accessibility. Any of those folders would be a good name, right? Cool. Any questions? So now I could go back and scale my app back down, go back to settings, and I could scale back down here to the default, which is about 4 here. And if I go back to my app, reload it, right? That just happens automatically. I'd have to relaunch the app. Cool? All right, great. Let us keep going here. Second thing we want to do, we want to be able to segue, right? Our favorite thing. We want to be able to segue past a country from one view controller to a next view controller. So without me telling you how to do it, we should be able to do it by now. So create a second view controller, segue from the cell, or create a segue from the cell to your second view controller. And for our second view controller, add in a UI image view and a label. That's what we added. So I'll do it, but please feel free to go ahead because this is practice. We've done it a bunch of times, and it's good assessment practice. So we are getting, maybe make it 40% of the height, and then the label, just make the label at the bottom of it. A UI image view. A UI image view takes up the top 40% of the screen. And then at the bottom of the UI image view, put a label. The label will be the description of the country. And the navigation title will be the country name. Three things. We'll set the country name using the navigation title. We'll have an image taking up 40% of the screen's device. And we'll have a label for the country description at the bottom of the image. Cool? All right, so what are we doing here? So from my cell, I control drag from my cell over to my view controller. I'll create a segue. I'll say show segue. So show segue basically pushes a new view controller onto the existing controller. It pushes a new view controller onto the existing controller. So if I had one view controller, now my navigation controller has two view controllers. When I click on the back button, it pushes, when I click on the back button, it pops that view controller off the stack. So now I have one view controller. Cool? All right, so what are we doing here? The country name, the title will change. So for here, you could make your second title. You could change it. You could change the second title from large automatic. If it's up to you, I could say for my second view controller, do not use the large titles. So I could say never here. It's up to you what you want to do. But the big things, you need an image view and you need a label. And the image view takes the top 40% of the super view. So I look for image view. My image view, I'll set at 0, 0, roughly here. And my constraints, I'll say add new constraints. For the top, it's going to be 0. For the lead-in, 0. For trailing, 0. Add 3 constraints. I'll go ahead and control drag from my image view to my super view. I'll say equal heights. I'll edit my constraints for my image view. I'll edit the height to make it say 40%. Let's see what that looks like. That's fine here. Great. So this is my image view. Next up. And for your image view, make sure to change the content mode to say aspect fill. So for your image view, change the content mode to aspect fill. Fill the entire frame. You could control drag from your image view in the document outline if you want. You could control drag from your image view to your safe area and get equal heights.
What did you set the after ambition
Aspect fill for the content mode of the image. So click on the image, go to Attributes Inspector. You should see content mode. and then change it from aspect fit to aspect fill.
And you resize it as well.
I resized the height to 0.04, so 40% of the height of the device. I control dragged, so to go back, control drag from your image view, control drag from your image view to the view, the super view, and select equal heights. Go to the size inspector, click on the size inspector for the image view. You see 4 constraints, correct? Make sure your image view is selected. You should have 4 now. Do you see one saying equal heights? So edit. You see an edit button? Which two do you see for your constraints? So you need a top. You forgot to do the top. So the top, click on add new constraints. It doesn't show up. Okay. So go back and click on add new constraints for your image view and select the top here and make sure it's 0 and click on add 1 constraint. Now you should have 3 constraints. So right now you might have 2 for the top. Look to see which one's a duplicate. Okay. Okay. We'll fix the constraints, but the most important part of this part of the project is passing data. So after your image view, add in a label. Everybody add in a label, right? So click on your library and add a label. I just want us to pass data. That's the most important part of this. And then we are good. So add a label right below your image view. You could center it and you could give it a top constraint. That's all you need. For the label, you center horizontally and you add center horizontally and add a top constraint to the bottom of your image view. Get a label again. Where is my label? Label. Yeah, set the top constraints to 0 for the label. Where's my label? Where's my label playing? Okay, so the top constraint of the label is 8. Top constraint of the label is 8, right? Add 1 constraint for the label. My label is off. 1 second. I need to restart my computer. Where's my image? 1 second. Image. Let's see. My image view is right below my image. And then click on your image view, add constraints. I know it's my computer that needs to be restarted here. Reluctant to restart it though. One second, let me just restart Xcode for a second. Let me restart Xcode. When you're done setting up your label, go ahead and give your class, create a class, because we need to create a class to manage. We need to create a class to manage our second view controller. For the class, I would call it country detail controller, right? And after that, set up your two UI elements. So control drag over the UI image view to that new class, control drag the label over to that new class, and go ahead to your first view controller, set up the prepare for segue. Okay? Cocoa Touch class, yes. And it's a UI view controller subclass. So we all should know what we're doing while I'm waiting for my Xcode to get restarted. For the label, just do 8 from the bottom of the image view and center it horizontally. Those are only 2 constraints it needs. You want to create a class to manage your scene, your second scene. You need to create a class, a UI view controller, to manage that second scene. You could call it country detail controller. And at this point, that's basically a review at this point. So we should be able to go and set up that past the country. We're passing the country from first view controller to second view controller. Does everybody know what we're doing? Right? Okay, cool.
This would, is it going to be a Cocoa Touch file or something?
Yeah, Cocoa Touch, and then subclass UI view controller.